Anybody in here, a father or grandfather or a mother, do you have any grandkids? Grandkids? So that's why I'm here. I've got two granddaughters, and my wife and I've run a few businesses into the ground, but then we ran one that's still running after almost 40 years. So we've lived the American dream. And I could have retired 10 years ago, but I asked myself, can I really sit here and do nothing when our country is going down the drain for future generations? And just one day I was just sitting there reading the Constitution, just for nothing else to do. I just read the Constitution, and it said Article 5. And I started asking questions, well, why don't we do this? So we started this campaign. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. We started the campaign in 2010, and we were completely naive. So naive, it's crazy. We actually believed that Congress would follow the Constitution, and I figured if we get enough Article 5 applications for a balanced budget amendment, the majority of Republicans would make sure that we got the convention called. It only takes a majority of Congress to call the convention. And when I found out that leadership on the Senate, on the Republican side, actually defeated an application vote in Kentucky, I learned the hard way that Congress has no interest in letting the states into their budgeting process. So we made a discovery, and the discovery is that the states in 1979, 39 states had applied for a convention on a fiscal responsibility amendment or a convention on any subject, any and all subjects. And everything since then has changed. So there are things you can do in January in your state to make it not just possible, but to actually make it happen, that we have a convention of states to draft, and then a convention in every state to ratify under Article 5, an amendment to the Constitution that will deal with inflation. And the question about, well, is it going to be possible for us to write an amendment that will force Congress to actually change their behavior, or is it going to be, a problem with courts enforcing it? We think an amendment can be written with numbers in it, audited numbers. If they don't hit the audited number, they don't go back to work the next year. In other words, you got to, members of Congress, you have got to comply with the Constitution. If you don't, you lose your job. And so it's a number, it's an audit number, it's an independent number. That's the enforcement mechanism. We don't need the courts. We don't need Congress. We don't need the president. We need compliance with a number in the Constitution that says you cannot, my personal opinion is you should not be able to grow government faster than our paychecks, ever. I mean, over time, just on a yearly basis. So we know, you can tell from the people that presented just before, there are so many ideas that have been well thought of and practiced around the world. We can write a great amendment, but it's going to be up to you, state legislators, to define the subject of the convention, and then to reach out to these experts around the world to find those provisions in the Constitution. So wanted to go back to the basics, which is James Madison Article 5. And this is what really sold the ratification, especially the last two states. Virginia and New York are on the edge. If both of those didn't go, we wouldn't have a country. So what they pitched and what they said is, Madison equally enables the general and the state governments to originate the amendment of errors. So far, sports fans, it's 33 proposed by Congress, 0 by the states. It's not their fault. It's Congress's fault. And I hate to tell you this, but the Article 5 library says that in 1908, the number was hit, the bell was rung, there was total silence on direct election of U.S. senators. You can look it up, Article 5 library. George Washington's farewell address. Somebody else asked me the question, why a vote of the people? Why a vote of the people is because that's what our founders expected, that all amendments to the Constitution would be ratified by a vote of the people. And in fact, if you read the Constitution itself, you will see where we the people came from. We the people came from the fact that in the Constitution was actually ratified by a vote of the people for the yes pledged delegates to the state conventions when our country was formed. So Washington's farewell address repeated this and said, if the constitutional powers be wrong, let it be corrected by an authentic vote of the people of a whole. Now this is so sad. I hope you understand the gravity of what Congress has done to us. Nevada's 1979 application was the 34th, according to the Article 5 library. And you can see it here, whereas continuous deficit financing by the federal government supports inflationary conditions which adversely affect the national economy and all Americans, particularly those persons with fixed or low income. As David Walker mentioned, we've gone $30 trillion in the hole since then. The value of the dollar's declined by 70%. This is probably the biggest tragedy that I can imagine for our country, especially for my granddaughters. We need to make them pay for this by forcing them to call the convention with a mandamus case. This is where you come in. The updated application authorizes your attorney general to file a mandamus case that is open and shut on never counting, and that there is a question about aggregation. We're working on that. Alexander Hamilton also pitched Article 5, Congress shall call a convention. Nothing in this particular is left to the discretion of that body. So far their discretion has been to ignore them completely, not file them properly. National rulers, whenever 9 or 2/3 concur, have no option on the subject. None of this has happened. The political truth can be brought to the test of mathematical demonstration. This hasn't happened because we were ignorant of the history of applications in our country until December 23rd of last year. This is why we are so thrilled to have 2 members of Congress, Jody Arrington and our senator from Indiana, are going to file not an application, they're going to file the call of the convention. It'll do 2 things. It calls a convention based on 1979 numbers. And number 2, it says that any ratification will be by state convention. And I think you might have missed this, but the state convention mode of ratification we used in 1933. If you wanted to be a delegate to that convention, you had to pledge an oath and put the oath on your petition, and the oath said, I will vote for or against ratification. When you went to, then they would print the ballot, your name would be under the yes column or under the no column. The people in 39 out of 40 states actually voted for the yes pledge delegate. Overwhelmingly, prohibition was repealed at that. And so that House concurrent resolution is going to be a Senate concurrent resolution. Very simple. It is very powerful, and it is the only way forward. If it has to be enforced by the Supreme Court, let's get ready. So anyway, bottom line is, you need to get involved. There's 3 pieces of legislation. We will hope, on behalf of my grandchildren, that you'll take charge of this legislation and run it next year.